What up, what up, what up? Welcome to another episode of NewOrleans.Basketball, NewOrleans.Network podcast. Happy holidays to you. Happy New Year to you and your people. Happy everything except for the Pelicans. Happy holiday season to everybody that follows us and that rocks with us. We're excited to do this pod with you. It's been a little bit. The Pelicans had a homestand, and no, they did not win any games. But before we jump into that, what you got for the people, Garrick? Happy
What up? What,
holidays to you.
what up? What up, bro? What up? Man, it was a great holiday season, man. Having you and the kiddos home, man. Y'all always come and pick the spirits up, man, and rejuvenate the energy, man. I just wish we could have had the pals over for a little gumbo or something. Maybe that would have changed a little bit. I'm telling you, man, Juju deserves better. My nephew deserves. He went to his first basketball game, his first NBA game, and the Pelicans embarrassed him, of course. So, yeah, man, it's this is a time of change. Holiday season, the New Year's coming, and it's time for people to bring their New Year resolution and to pray, pick up all of their new changes and things like that. How you doing, Jasper? Happy holidays and New Year's to you. But yes, it's time for a change. But seems like things are not changing for the Pelicans, and maybe it's time for some things to change. So we'll get into that. But I'm good. Everything's good on this side, bro.
That's what I love to hear. Before we just jump right into it, because we got a lot to talk about today, make sure you guys will follow us on X, on Twitter, on IG, on TikTok. That's NO_basketball, no E. Make sure you are liking the episode below. If you're not already, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, NewOrleans.Basketball. So, the Pelicans have 5 wins, and so do the Saints. The Pelicans are 5-28. They get one win in the month of December versus the Phoenix Suns. Happens to be the last time you saw Brandon Ingram on the court. It was a rough December. They've now lost 10 in a row. Early in the season, they lost 9 in a row. They just had a 5-game homestand, lost all 5 of those. Things are tough. And it just so happened that in this given week, the Sacramento Kings, who coach that they just gave an extension to after coming off 18 months of being the coach of the year, let go of Mike Brown, which naturally led to, well, let's look at the team with the worst record in the NBA, which happens to be your New Orleans Pelicans, and see, is this the same? You mentioned it. We were in the Smoothie King Center through all the losses this week, and for the first time ever in 3 years now, you heard boos when they had introed Willie Green. And so let's just get into it, man. Like, things are ugly. The season has gone awry. Nothing has worked. Nothing has been aligned. But should Willie Green really be on the hot seat? Let's start with the reasons why maybe he should be.
Yeah, man. It has been tough sledding. And listen, I'm never a proponent of calling for people's job. You hear people say that all the time. It's this person's a human being. It's a person with a family. It's the holiday season. Like, I feel for Mike Brown I think got handed the end of a short stick. I don't think he got a fair shake. And I think, when you're a coach that holds people accountable, and isn't afraid to look players in the face and not demand better and then suggest changes and things like that. Sometimes we saw that with Stan Van Gundy, right? Like sometimes the players just like just pushing whatever. So obviously De'Aaron Fox has come out and talked about that's not the case, and he wasn't. But I think you could kind of tell that they lost 5 games in a row and they fired him. There was something there that caused, not just blow up right then and there. So again, that action turned the attention to the Pelicans, right? And Willie Green, because the Pelicans are mired in I can't even count how many losses. It's a lot of losses in a row. I think it's 10 in a row right now. I think they've had a 10-game losing streak, a 9-game losing streak, a 8-game. It's just ridiculous.
Not good.
Yeah, it's not great. So I think that 2 things can be true at the same time. I don't deal in absolutes. That's for the Siths. Shout out to the Star Wars fans out there. But I do think that Willie Green has been handed a really tough situation. I think the injuries are what they are. I think asking any team to lose, to still win without their second, their first best player and the second best player. I think that's an almost impossible, daunting task to do on a consistent basis, especially when you're trying to incorporate new people and new roles and things like that. That's outside of your two best players, right? Like you would hope to have some incorporation with these new guys, while the talent of your best stars kind of kept you afloat, and you just don't have that. However, there are things, and I've talked about it on this podcast that I was looking for to move over to port over to next season, right? I realized that this season was lost. Once you start looking at where the 10th seed is in the West and how many wins they have versus the Pelicans, who just seem to keep losing and losing, there were things that I wanted to see ported over to next season, and a lot of it was from Willie Green. And there are a lot of losses on this schedule that you can look to and say the Pelicans didn't have their best players, and that's why they lost. I want to point to two games this week, though, in this homestand that I don't think you can say that for. And it's the Nuggets game, and it's this Clippers game. And for two reasons, I don't think that that's a loss that you can say that's why they lost was because of no Zion and no Brandon Ingram. Those guys in the Nuggets game had a lead going into the fourth quarter. The Clippers game, you had a double-digit lead going into the fourth quarter. And there were things that happened in those second half of those games, and really throughout both of those games. I'm just speaking of those games in particular, that I looked and I said, that is a lack of creativity. That is a lack of accountability. That is a lack of offensive ingenuity. That is a lack of at least trying to identify a system that will be conducive to the team. It felt like Jordan Hawkins not getting shots in overtime, in the fourth quarter and in overtime of that Nuggets game, where people are saying like they're denying Jordan Hawkins. And I'm like, a lot of NBA teams deny the hot player. You still find ways to get that guy involved when he's leading the team in shots. And then you come out and at the end of the game, at the post-game presser, you talk about like, yeah, you were trying to draw up a play, but then you let CJ, kind of take over the game and take the shot. And you say that you're going to live with those kind of things. And those are the kind of accountability, like lack of accountability that allows CJ to come out and take 25 shots against the Clippers, right? And completely freeze out Trey Murphy in the second half of the game. That is a breakdown in coaching. That has nothing to do with Zion, has nothing to do with Brandon Ingram. Had they lost that Nuggets game, but Jordan Hawkins got shots and was missing them, and if if you were being, holding CJ accountable, holding DeJounte accountable for some of the pass, and they still lost, I could look at some of those things and say, hey, they lost, but look at the plays that Willie was trying to draw. Look at him trying to get those guys through. And it just seems like time in and time out, the same offense is happening in the end of the games in the fourth quarter, no matter who has a hot hand, whether it's Trey, Jordan Hawkins, whatever the case is, it ends up being the CJ McCollum show over and over and over again. And it just seems like there's no structure, there's no coaching there. It just seems as though it's kind of like, hey, you guys roll the ball out there, we'll figure it out as we go. And so I do think that two things can be true. I think that he has been dealt a crappy hand, but at the same time, there are things that I would like to have seen, even in losses, that I am just not seeing right now. And so it's tough to look. The fan base is tough to look people in the eyes, especially when a coach that is more decorated, and Mike Brown winning Coach of the Year, gets fired. and then to look at the what the product is on the floor for the New Orleans Pelicans and say, hey, this is something that Willie Green should be safe from. That's my opinion.
I understand, and what I would say from the Cons perspective and where everyone's at, and I understand the entire fan base is frustrated. For the first time going in the season, you felt like you had something, you felt like everything, and then everything goes around, and now it's like, well, who do you blame? Just like with everything, to your point, two things can be true, but there's three sides to every story. Like there's blame to be assigned to the players, to the coaching staff, to the GM.
There's a lot of blame.
There's a lot of things that could go wrong, and some of them is just bad luck. And there's not anyone to blame. You just have to say he got stepped on by Lou Dort. Like there's just things that you can't control. But the things you can control, to your point, there was a couple things. So when I think about Willie Green being on the hot seat and some of the things that have been tough to watch just from his development, every coach has areas where they could be better. We've talked about some of those things with Willie Green. Like going into this season, defense was the calling card that even if they couldn't score, even if the offense looked clunky, even last year when Zion played 70 games and BI, there were still times where like, man, this feels clunky. Well, now this year they don't have the defense either, right? And a lot of that comes because you haven't had the defensive players out there to deploy any system. You're just running in whoever's got a healthy body on the court. But then you look at like after timeout plays, and yes, some of it has to go with the players, but they're 29th and 24th in percentage in field goal percentage after a timeout. That's not good. That means that you're not drawing up an easy bucket in situations that are advantageous to you. My biggest knock and my biggest, frustration with the coaching staff so far is that there seems to be just such a longer leash on veterans than there are on younger players. And I understand, like, veterans, you got to let them play through it sometimes. And veterans, you've got to be able to know, okay, they make a mistake, but they're going to fix it on the other end. But at that same time, how many times have you watched CJ McCollum shoot a shot and thought, man, that was a tough shot? At some point, there has to be something from the coaching staff that said there's a penalty to not making good shots. Like you hear from the players, DeJounte, we have to play for each other. Trey Murphy, I'm just trying to play the right way. Well, if there's opportunities to play the right way, but you're shooting a shot with 20 seconds on the shot clock, contested, faded away with the bigger defender in your face, like at some point there has to be a negative to that type of piece. And for veterans, you've seen it over and over. You mentioned DeJounte. He struggled with turning the ball over. But again, you don't see Willie go to anyone else or to take the ball out of his hands in situations like that. In past season, you've heard I'm not calling you out, I'm calling you up and things like that. But to a degree, like there has to be some repercussions when you're just doing things that are detrimental to the team. And so it feels as if when a young player does that, they're quickly taken out of the game no matter who's available. But when a veteran does it over and over and over again, it seems that they still have the leash to do that from game to game. And I understand you've been waiting for some of these guys to get healthy, but at the same time, you have to build a program and there has to be standards for everybody all along the way. The other piece that everyone wants to lean on is the adjustments in game take too long. You talk about it. Hey, sometimes the offense get clunky. And actually in that Denver game, I thought that they draw up a good play. Jordan Hawkins is wide open for the game-winning shot, and CJ made the bad decision. I can't blame Willie Green for drawing up a game-winning shot, and his veteran, made the bad decision. Now, what I would blame is, okay, maybe you don't put him in the position to make that decision in the first place. And so, like, that's what we're talking about. We talk about guard your yard in some of the games this week. Like, you see a player has clearly got it going, and whether you're putting Herb Jones on him, whether you're sending two, whether you're doubling, whether you're trapping, at some point, guard your yard is not working. This guy has 30. Jalen Brunson has 30 points. Like, John Morant has 25, and he's got everybody rocking side to side. At some point, you've got to adjust to what the game is giving you on the defensive end. And on the offensive end, we've talked about this in previous pods. It seems like, and we've been screaming for it, the Pelicans went into this season saying, we're going to run a predatory wing offense where we isolate our best ball handler or whoever as the mismatch on the court, and we're going to go because that's how BI thrives, that's how Zion thrives. Well, BI and Zion have not been available. And so what you've got left on the court, you can't run the predatory wing offense when you don't have predatory wings on the court. So asking CJ McCollum to ISO into a defender who's longer, faster, quicker, younger than him, and asking him to be successful and efficient over and over again, like that's putting him in a situation to fail, right? And it's not like, okay, well, there's not a lot of practice times. Everybody in the NBA runs the same things. A lot of teams run things with motion and off ball to get some of those guys who can't create by themselves in a one-on-one situation better shots. The Pelicans seem to like lack that stuff. There's times when it happens, and there's other times where it's like throw your best player on the court the ball and see what happens. Where the two best players haven't been available. So I don't think that it should be the strategy moving forward. And then like outside of in-game adjustments, like rotation adjustments have been just too long. Like Devontae Graham, Garrett Temple, Javonte Green now. Like I understand the wanting to go to a veteran and their experience and their know-how, but sometimes the younger option is just better. And if you're getting the same result over and over, it shouldn't take 9, 10, 11, 12 games in a row of seeing bad play over and over before you make some type of adjustment to your lineup, especially when you have younger players below them that are giving you more as soon as they get into the court. And so, like, there's a lot of things that he could do better in and he could grow in. And again, this is just his first couple years as a head coach as well. There are still you can watch highly decorated coaches in the league and watch possessions and watch quarters where you're like, what is going on with what they have on the court? But it's too often with the
do that. I do that every time I watch Steve Kerr. So every time I watch Steve Kerr coach, some of these guys be like, what?
Not every possession, not every game's going to be good, but there's just too many common themes that you're seeing from place to place. Now, that's the negative. Here's why. Honestly, there's been reports about, hey, this is not the same situation as Sacramento with Willie Green. This is something that the team is not blaming on Willie Green, and obviously nobody wants to hear that. But here's what I'd caution you. Until this season, the Pelicans have been 6th in defense in back-to-back years. 3 years ago, you mentioned Stan Van Gundy. You were screaming. If the Pelicans would just be average on defense, they could give themselves a chance, right? So Willie Green was able to do that. We've talked about the talent development and the talent acquisition from a small market team like the Pelicans who has no history of any type of monumental success. Well, you look at Trey Murphy and his development. You look at Herb Jones, his first team development. You look at Jose Alvarado. You look at Najee Marshall, who's absolutely thriving in his new environment in Dallas. You look at Jordan Hawkins. You look at Yves Missi, and oh, by the way, Brandon Boston, who you found off the street from the Clippers this year. They've done a pretty good job of getting talent and watching that talent grow from year to year. Now, can Willie Green control who is on the court around the supplemental pieces? I'm not sure that that's something you can necessarily blame him for. Until this season, every year the Pelicans have been winning more, and it just so happened in the year where he's playing with the worst deck of cards in the league. It's not even remotely close. He's given the worst position. You're blaming everything on him. Now, could a more experienced coach get more wins in the situation? Probably. But I don't think you're calling in Phil Jackson out of retirement and getting him to get 20 wins out of this roster of what you've seen so far. And so I look at those things and I say, I'm not sure all of that is necessarily Willie Green's fault. What are some of the things that you've seen from a positive standpoint that says, hey, maybe this is more the situation than necessarily Willie Green?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's context behind everything, right? There's context behind the situation with Willie Green. And like I said, the deck of cards that he's been given is terrible. I mean, Zion has played 6 games, and that's not Willie Green's fault. It's not. Brandon Ingram turning his ankle on the Lou Dort play is not Willie Green's fault. Brandon Ingram still being on the team is not Willie Green's fault. Like, none of that is Willie Green's fault. Willie Green can control what's on the court, and what's there. And throughout this entire run from Willie Green, I mean, they've added wins every year, obviously, except for this year, right? Like every year they've added wins. Last year, they won 49 games. Any year other than last year, you win 49 games. That's good for at least a 6 seed, at least at the minimum. And you were looking at the play-in at 49. Just was a crazy year last year with the player participation policy and everybody trying to play. Zion playing 70 games, a lot of other players pushing to try to get to make all NBA, and so they could get that extra money. Just an insane year last year. And so any other year, 49 wins would get you a higher seed than what it got you in. And you don't win 49 games without the players believing something about you, right? Like it's very hard to win in spite of a coach. It's very hard to do that. And so for them to win that many games last year, 49 games is a lot of games to win. And for them to win that many, there has to be things that these guys have. And again, the team, even this season, it's not like they don't have effort. Like, it's not like they are not playing hard. I think that there are things that he could do to help, kind of push the team over a little bit and get a win in some of these games where they're losing at the end of games and things like that. I do think that he could coach better in those games and do things better, but they are fighting, right? And in a season where they have all a reason to just show up to the court and just go through the motions and lose by 50 every time, they do play hard. And so the final thing I would ask is, back to your point, if you do fire Willie Green and Willie Green is not the answer, who is? Who is the answer? And again, I am open to comments. I want to see in the comments, give us a coach and give us the reason you think that coach could come in and improve on this situation or do things better in this situation, because it's just hard for me to see a coach that right now, with this particular instance of players, to come in and change everything immediately and turn things around where it's semi-decent than what you see. I said, go ahead.
Before you go on your next point, not only on top of that, so you mentioned the 49 wins, which is second most in franchise history. That just so happened to be in the same season, the only season where Zion and Brandon Ingram played 60-plus games apiece. So correlation or causation, do you think those two things go hand in hand? And to your point, like, if you're bringing someone in to solve it all, everyone says clean house. Okay, right now the Pelicans lack any type of identity because they haven't been able to put the same guys on the court for more than 10 games so far this season. Like, everything has been trying to piecemeal together. Hawk comes in, Hawk gets hurt. CJ comes in. Like, it's always been one thing up, one thing down, things like that. So they have no identity at all. They have no chemistry. Trey Murphy got hurt in training camp. So before the season even started, they couldn't figure out who they needed to be as a team if healthy. And by game one, Zion wasn't available. So it's like, how is a team supposed to have an identity? How is a team supposed to make it all fit and make the chemistry work if no one is available? And then you throw in the fact that everyone's injured. Well, when you come back, it's not just Brandon Ingram that takes a while to get in the rhythm after injury. Players take a while to get to rhythm. So, like, CJ's starting to hit shots now and Herb's starting to hit shots now, but both of them have been struggling so far since their injury. DeJounte's been dealing with a lot with his injury with his hand and also on his mental with his mom being sick. And so, like, you add all these things together, it's not necessarily like you're making excuses, but that is a damn situation for any coach to thrive in. And so whether it's a name you want to throw out or not, make sure that they know all the variables that come with the particular job that's going to necessarily be successful for them. But to your point, there was the stat that I looked up the other day. I was just curious, how many teams in the West have to deal with the Pelicans deal with? There's been four teams, Garrick, that have played one game without both of their best players. Dallas is 0-1 without Kyrie and Luka. Golden State is 1-1, and the Clippers haven't had Kawhi all year, but James Harden has only missed one game, and they're 0-1. The Pelicans have played 27 games without their two best players. So there's three other teams that have played a combined of 5 games, and the Pelicans have played 27. That's not even close to anyone else. And so to measure Willie Green at the same level if you would measure some of these other coaches that are playing without their best player, the Pelicans have lost the most games due to injury. The Pelicans lost the most games due to not having their best player. So it's almost impossible to judge him under these circumstances. And I think it's damn near unfair to blame him for the entire season given the situation that at hand. But one thing we've got to give him credit for is the development of Yves Missi. And I want you to talk to him because, again, we watched this man in person, and we watched him from the beginning of summer camp, the moment he was drafted to what he is now. And he missed a big free throw at the end of the last game. He missed it bad. It was a very late.
I'm about to say
2K. It was 0%.
No
chance of going in.
Boy.
That was bad. But again, he probably never should have been in that situation in the first place. But we've talked about his ability and his outlook as Rookie of the Year. NBA.com has him second in the rankings right now. I don't know, Garrick. If this team figures out a way to win a game, much less multiple games, I think it's his award to lose this season. What are your thoughts on what you've seen from Yves so far, the development that he's made, which is really him and Trey Murphy is really the silver lining of so far just a deplorable season.
Yeah, it is. Again, I think I'm going to personally coin the poetic injustice tagline on this season, just because I just find it hilarious how, like, it feels like we're in the upside down world. Like, you get Zion and BI for games, and no reserve players, nobody else is available. And then those two go down, and everybody else is back. But now you don't have Brandon Ingram and Zion. But I think the funniest thing about this season is you could turn on any television show, any podcast, any sports talk, anything, anybody talking about the Pelicans before the season started. And the first thing that came out their mouth was, they're irrelevant. Damn Zion, damn Brandon Ingram, damn DeJounte, damn CJ, damn Trey Murphy. They don't have a starting center. There is no center on the roster. There is not a person who plays the center position who has a New Orleans Pelicans jersey. That person does not exist because there are no centers on the roster. That's what everybody said. And now you're in game 31, whatever it is. Everything is it's like the Childish Gambino walking in with everything on fire. Everything's on fire. But the one thing that is not on fire is the center position, who you may have found a cornerstone player for the foreseeable future in Yves Missi. I think it's just a beautiful development that out of this just morass of a season, there's this flower growing out of concrete, and it's Yves Missi. And I think Yves has obviously surpassed everybody's expectations of him, right? You coming into this season, you talked about the rawness. You talked about him not playing basketball for a long time, him being here by himself. Like, that's a shock to have to deal with that. And just not being ready to contribute, right? It was everybody sure that Daniel Tice was going to start, and that Yves, the best case scenario was that Yves shows something, and shows something and was able to play. Well, now, like, through hook or by crook, Yves Missi is now the starter for the Pelicans. And just like it took, an injury to get Herb into the starting lineup, and then lo and behold, you found a cornerstone starter for years to come. I think you've done the same thing with Yves Missi. He is just a phenomenal, he's a high motor guy, but you can watch his basketball IQ kind of growing and showing every single game, right? Like most high energy guys, you think, they just out there kind of like JaVale McGee, Isaiah Stewart, just kind of like out there and bull in a china shop type things. But Yves has touch around the rim. He's making smart passes. He's slipping some screens instead of setting the screen. He's doing things on the court that, like, you would have said, okay, this is going to take him 3 years to get there, 4 years to understand the spacing of the NBA, the verticality rules, the physicality, what you can get away with, what you can't get away with. And it seems like every time he's learning things. Now, he's been put in a ridiculous situation. I just off the top of my head, when at the end of the game against the Nuggets, they foul, up 3. They're up 3. They foul the Pelicans. They have one to give. So the Pelicans go and take the ball out. At that point, you are aware that they are fouling up 3. And you should probably get the ball into Jordan Hawkins or Trey Murphy or CJ's hand. And Trey was out there. Trey got injured. But Jordan Hawkins, a shooter's hand. Hey, shoot the 3, go for it. If not, you get fouled. But anyway, they passed the ball into Yves Missi. And Jokic was so surprised that they passed the ball to Yves Missi with his back to the basket that he was like, oh, okay, I'll foul. And I guess if you're going to do that, I'm going to foul him. And like that, he should be put in better positions, but it's not his fault. It is what's been laid at his feet. And I think the best thing about Yves in this terrible season that the Pelicans are going through is that he seems too young to know what's going on around him, and he's just out there battling, fighting every single game. It sucks because again, coming into this season, the Pelicans have the talent, they have the Zion, they have the this, they have the that, they got this guy, there's a deepest roster, they just don't have a center. Well, they might have gotten the best center. It looks like the best center in the draft. So imagine what he would look like with more space, with more available top-end players. And so it sucks, but I think what you get out of this is that you're pushing him to kind of figure things out faster, and it's going to help him in the long run because he's going to be here for a while. And so I think, this experience, while it sucks to see him go through it and fail it sometimes, it is going to help him out a lot. But, man, has he shown a lot already, and I am just super impressed with him.
You and I talked about this off the pod. Like, every game, like outside the jump shot and obviously the free throw and things like that, every game you watch the Pelicans play, you're like, man, Yves Missi is like literally the perfect center for this team. Like the 5 blocks yesterday is one thing. The ability to score, and like he showed me a lot more with his back to the basket than he showcased at all at Baylor and at all this summer and things like that. There's just so much that's left untapped for them, and you can see him learning from game to game, which again, that doesn't happen all the time. And again, there's no excuses for this season. It is what it is. Injuries happen to everybody. Nobody's feeling sorry for you. You got to eat your record on the chin. Decisions are made, jobs are lost, things are made. But in this scenario, to your point, the fact that Yves is growing without having someone that is a gravitational pull that always commands 2 or 3 or 4 and still able to thrive in situations and lead the NBA in offensive rebounds. Like, there's a guy that has only played 6 games for the Pelicans who'd be right up there in offensive rebounds. And so if those 2 guys ever are on the court for a significant amount of time, the way you beat teams can change and things along those lines. And so, again, the development from him, and we'll get into the next guy as well, this season are really what you're looking for. Like the crazy part about all this, with the talent Zion has and the talent the Pelicans acquired, that high expectations, even though they haven't won a playoff series in quite some time, is that the majority of the roster outside of Daniel Tice and CJ McCollum are like not in their prime yet. So a lot of these players, Jordan Hawkins, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, you're still figuring out what is the final version of that. And you're seeing those things develop. And so while Yves is playing in that environment, you're trying to see what can Trey add, and is Trey a playmaker, and can Herb get to the rim now because there's nobody else to get to the rim, and so can he develop that part? And so it's really like a learning environment, and you've talked about this before. You have to kind of change your perception of the season moving forward. Not so much like all the Pelicans make the playoffs, but what things are you figuring out about this roster so that you can either make adjustments or make changes or build on top of moving forward. And the thing you found out about Yves, this guy is going to be on your lineup for quite some time. And if he ever figures out how to shoot the jump ball in a division with Victor Wembanyama and and with Derek Lively and with Sengun. Like, that is such a vital pick that you had to have because the Pelicans were just so adept in that position. So let's talk about the other guy who, again, is the one silver lining in otherwise a disastrous season, is the development in Trey Murphy. You and I talked before the season. I'm not sure that the expectation should have ever been Trey Murphy could one day be your one option. I know he talks about, hey, I want to be the best player to ever play this game and things like that. And you've seen just leaps and bounds growth from him in multiple areas from last season to this season. But my question to you is more in regards to the development of Trey Murphy. In your eyes, does that hurt the chances of the Pelicans figuring something out with Brandon Ingram in a way that works for both sides? Because, like, this man is averaging 21 points per game and shooting up damn near 50, 40, 90 since he's gotten his legs underneath him in the month of December. And he's doing so as the one option on the court. If Brandon Ingram comes back, you want to see more of that. You want to see what that looks like. And so where's your head at? Like, is this the reason for the Pelicans to say bye, or is this something you want to add to?
Yeah, I do think that it has some bearings on it, right? Like we saw the incoming arrival of Scoot Henderson cause the Portland Trailblazers to let Damian Lillard, walk away instead of taking that pick and trading it for help. They saw an incoming player and they got rid of the other guy, and so I do think that it does have some bearing. I don't think that Brandon Ingram is still the superior player. He's still the better player. He's still the better guy. The point, I don't think it's the talent, obviously, with Brandon Ingram. It's the money issue. It's the cap. Mm-hmm. It's the restrictions. It's all of those things. And so in a very similar way that people hold Brandon Ingram not being able to drag a team to wins or whatever the case is, Trey Murphy is the number one and is putting up numbers, but the team is not winning. And so there is that. However, again, there's context to everything. I don't think that you look at Trey Murphy's inclusion on offense around a star the same way you do with Brandon Ingram. Obviously, Trey Murphy is a much more willing three-point shooter, a much better three-point shooter. And something that is causation, whatever the case is, but it seems like he gets to the line a little bit more better than Brandon Ingram. And so I do think that because Trey is locked in on a good contract, that, again, can you trade that contract the day after you sign it? I think you could trade Trey Murphy right now. That's how we kind of discuss contracts and if a contract is good or not. I don't think you could trade Brandon Ingram on a $40 million contract and a $50 million contract. And I think Trey Murphy's ascension, him being locked into this price point where he is for the foreseeable future, obviously lets him get back into it, a year earlier, but he's still locked in for 4 years. I think it does kind of muddy up the Brandon Ingram situation even more for the Pelican side, because again, this is even more leverage towards the Pelicans, right? You already have the Pelicans saying, listen, hit unrestricted free agent. Show me where you're going to go. Show me where you're going to go to this winning situation. You have the Pelicans saying, okay, find me a trade partner. Go find somebody who will trade for you under the contract and give you what you want, and we will do that. Still has yet to figure that out. And so now you can look and say, well, he might not be as good as you, but we have someone that is 70% of you, and still growing. And is probably if the reports that the Pelicans still, are behind Zion, and Zion that isn't asking for a trade, the Pelicans aren't looking to trade him. If that's the case, then having Zion, and then potentially if you have a lottery pick this year, right? Another guy, Trey is the kind of guy that you can fit all that around, right? Is because he's very plug and play. And so you have all of that working on your side if you're the Pelicans when you're going into these negotiations with Brandon Ingram. And so this is and I've been telling people you have to start looking at these contracts and these players now. It used to be a sin to have a guy walk out of your organization for nothing, right? Now you're seeing teams say we rather keep the flexibility than to just trade and bring some other money in and put us over the second tax apron and we don't win anyway. We much rather you walk away. We saw it with Golden State and Clay. Instead of trading Clay for Paul George or whoever, they didn't do that. They let him walk. The same thing happened with Paul George and the Clippers. Instead of trading Paul George and getting some other guys back, Kuminga and all of that, they say, listen, you walk, we'll keep our flexibility. The Pelicans now are looking at that. They are looking at the field and looking at who's out there going to trade for Brandon Ingram. It is yet to happen. He doesn't yet. He really, he played really well while he was playing. But again, the same issues that have plagued him came up again. And so he hasn't done anything in the eyes of other teams to increase his trade value. And so you have all of this. And now Trey Murphy's development, you've seen him have the ball in his hands as the one option, as the go-to guy. And he's been successful. He's looked good in it. Right? The team is not winning, but he looks good. And you can port him into the rotation on the team around Zion and Cooper Flag or whoever it is that you get, Ace Bailey, whoever it is that you get. Like any of those guys would work passing the ball to Trey Murphy on the 3-point line, and including Zion as well. So I do think the way this is some of the things that you talked about, where you talked about you want to have some answers. You want to have something answered at the end of this season. It's not, are the Pelicans can they win a playoff series? That's not going to be a question as that. You're not going to get the answer, can Zion play though? You're not going to get that question answered. You need to find some things to answer. And is Trey Murphy's development a real thing? This is something that we're starting to get a little bit of an answer for. And as we get more anecdotal talk, because again, Zion is week to week. I still don't know what week to week means, but week to week. And then Brandon Ingram is also week to week. So you're going to have this Trey Murphy experience for a couple of more games at least. And so this is something that you want to get the answer to. And as you get more and more evidence to see what the answer to that question is, I think that does play into the Brandon Ingram negotiations.
Here's where I'm at with it, and my stance really has not changed. I do think that there needs to be a shakeup on this roster, regardless of the results of the season, and I think it needs to be player-oriented. But I don't necessarily think it's Brandon Ingram. I agree with you. I think the Pelicans are gaining more and more leverage by the day as Trey continues to excel and continues to add things to his game and continues to kind of show that he's that next step. Now, I do think there's a level, again, most of these players are not in their peak form. I do think there's a level of, okay, Trey, now you're the one option. What are you going to do about it when people start treating you that way? It's the same thing with Zion. It's the same thing with Brandon Ingram. We've had the same conversations in the past. How do you create when you don't have the ball? How do you create when you're the number one focus on a game plan? Do you win the hustle plays? Do you win on the boards? Do you create that way? Do you create space for other people? That comes with becoming a star. And I think Trey's figuring that out, and that's why he disappears at times. Some of it is on coaching, some of it is on finding him the ball, but some of it is on him, right, from that angle. And so figuring that out. But as he's figuring that out, the Pelicans are getting more and more leverage, in my opinion, with Brandon Ingram. Because to your point, I don't think anything has changed. I don't think he's earned himself any more money from any other team. And so if you're going to take less money than the max, or you're going to take less money than what you think you're going to make, what situation is going to put you in the best position to thrive? Now, as far as the Pelicans are concerned, I've said this all season long, the Pelicans feel small. It feels as if they're constantly fighting to get rebounds, and they're constantly the little brother, and everyone's got to box out every possession because everyone's slender and no one's bulky or strong, even Yves, Missi at that standpoint. And without Brandon Ingram and Zion, you feel it even more. And so trading Brandon Ingram and not knowing what you get back, or letting him go and not knowing what you get back, and then you're left with a bunch of small guards and Jose and Jordan Hawkins and CJ McCollum and DeJounte Murray. Like, that's leaving holes to me, in my opinion. And so if there's a move, I would lean toward CJ McCollum because there are other people on the roster that can do things similar to him. There's not another person on the roster that can do things similar to Brandon Ingram. There's just not. And Trey Murphy is not that player. He can be his own player in his own right and a star in his own right, but the playmaking, the rebounding, the basketball IQ in some regards is just not on the same level as Brandon Ingram today. So I don't think his ascension necessarily means that they don't need Brandon Ingram from that standpoint. But again, there's more in games. The calendar turns. Hopefully 2025 is a better year than 2024 because, God, the Pelicans need it. The fan base needs it. The city needs it between the sports and things like that. But what you got left for the people as we turn the calendar, we start the new year, we're entering the second half of the season. Hopefully some people start coming.
You never know what people are going through, so give someone a smile today. Yes, happy holidays to everyone. Happy New Year. I think we should take 2024 and send it off into the sun, and just like let it stay there. I think in 2025, everybody's New Year's resolution to be whatever your religion is, whoever you pray to, whatever your ritual is, bring it to Airline Drive, and we just started there. We just started from the top down. Yeah, man, this is it's a tough situation all around for everyone. If Willie Green, if it's time for Willie Green to be fired before we make our next podcast, then so be it. It has just been a mess, and I don't know if you can blame everything on him. I don't know if you can also absolve him of everything. So again, it's why I don't make the decisions. I just report all the decisions when they make them. But let's hope that 2025 for everyone in basketball, outside of basketball, just life in general, everybody has a much better 2025. And as always, we will be there on the other side of the ball drop to cover this team. Rain, sleet, snow, and losses. We will be there. So with that being said, follow myself at Garrick_Rattler. Follow my brother at Raphael_Rattler. Follow the page at NO_Basketball, no E. That's on Twitter, Instagram, wherever you get your social medias. Most importantly, subscribe to NewOrleans.Basketball, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Happy New Year.